السلام عليكم. كيف الحال؟ إن شاء الله بخير. First of all, I'd like to thank the General Cultural Authority for inviting me here. It's a pleasure to be here. I'd like to thank Raneem and IFRS and the team. During this program, I really thought of what I'm going to be talking about. And since we're talking about culture and talking about art, there's so much things involved within that. And before I will start about art, or before that I start about design and so forth, I would like to talk about the totality of culture, or maybe the human culture in general. Starting from way beyond thaqafa or culture, looking at the beautiful formation that we have in our life, in our earth here. Those are, if you're not recognizing what they are, those are actually snowflakes. التلجة نفسها. Each one of those snowflakes, you can see there's a difference in the way they look and shape, but they have a commonality to it. You have a shape that they all fall into, which is the hexagonal shape, the shakl al-thulasi. And it's been said, which is, I really, when I heard it, I was very inspired to see that each snowflake that fall and fill in this earth from the beginning of time and from now to the future is always a different one than the one before it or after. But they all fall within the hexagonal shape, اللي هو شكل الثلاثي. And I would like to think us in the same sense. We are all different, but yet united. And again, another example, if you look at this pattern, this is actually a section of our DNA that embedded into us. You know, the DNA, it's like a spiral shape, but if you cut it from the top and you look at it from top to bottom, you will see this beautiful pattern that forms. And it consists of a 10-fold pattern, which is based on a 5-fold pattern, which some said you also can find it in an apple. If you cut the apple in half, هتشوف الشكل الخماسي موجود في داخل الapple. And there's, of course, when culture comes in, and theory and talks, okay, the apple, Adam and Eve, and so forth. And each culture have its own analysis or interpretation to that beautiful law or forms that exist around us. Some culture focus on it more than others. Some took it as a theory, and they built into the architecture as well. Through the Islamic art, they really took it as a base of انطلاقة, or base of departure, because they really celebrated and admired science, and there was no contradiction between science and faith. And the craftsmen at that time, they really wanted, not because of the forbidden to draw a shape or a human or a face or a creature, but they really were into something else. They were really focusing into the admiration and celebration that science within nature exists. And they really, from that, they took it and translated into patterns that you see in most of the houses, architecture, and so forth. And there's a lot of course, different cultures who celebrated the same essence. If you look at even, for example, the geometry of flowers, you will see also the analysis of it. It comes from a departure. It comes from a point. There's a reference point that all this creation that comes from it. Yes, they're all different, but there is a law. You know, there's a law that intangible. There's a law that we usually see it or don't, but everybody agrees there is an order. The only debate, I think, between culture, if this ordered itself, or somebody have ordered it. But looking from what around us, there's all this beautiful proportion, والنسب والأقدار, and this phrase of the Quran, وخلقنا كل شيء بقدر, that we have made everything within proportion. And that, I think, the kind of point that really everybody departs from it, and it sees everybody agree to it. If you look at even the mathematics, this could be the visual mathematics of what it is. Now, every belief, faith, or culture, or even an idea, it have a reference point that is start from a beginning or an end. Even any moving thing, it starts from a point, then it goes in rotation with it. If it's closer, the law of gravity, of course, pulls you towards it, and closer, it gets then become one. And this is a lot of the theories of the Big Bang, as you see from the universe, also in the atoms, and how the atoms, everything rotate around it. So from this point of view and seeing how the movement that you see in the universe, in a way when I looked at it, and for me, my reference point is Mecca. And that's the point of departure and deport for us. When we pray, when we travel all over the world, we will pray towards it. And once we're close to it, we start rotating around it. And the beauty of this also, in a way, it celebrates the different cultures that people goes from. No matter what race you are, you're still kind of within that kind of movement or motion that brings us all together. So one thing important about having, and especially from where I come from, there is so much diversity. And this diversity, you can see it very clearly in the houses and the people in our bloods. Is so much of a mixture there, but it's been a continuous time. And if you're talking about Mecca, since the Abrahamic time or even before, which we believe is the first house of all being, not necessarily, and it's mentioned for أول بيت وضع للناس, not للعرب or للمسلms or so forth. But there's a huge message that we believe the Creator have put it in there, and this is the only place that everybody feels a sense of belonging to. So no matter where you're from, you will visually see some of the influence in the houses and the food and the culture itself. For me, I have a design background. My father's an architect, so I get so much influence by him. And looking at the archives that we have, some of the houses in Mecca, you can see clearly the influence from Spain, for instance, from Morocco, from India. And each one of them come, but they all kind of balance each other. You can see the same, for example, Roshan, which is the wooden work here, in Pakistan or in Afghanistan as a jali. But here, the component of it with the arch in the bottom is almost like the Mamluki side, which you can see a lot in Egypt. And we always say in Jeddah that we have this unique breakfast, اللي هو الفول والتميس. And as you know, the fool is originally from Egypt, and it's an Egyptian dish. And you have tamis, the Afghani tamis from Afghanistan. But they come together as a cuisine in back home. So there's this concept, or this theory that I was very much influenced by my father. Hear him talking about it. My main, and he comes from Mecca. He lived Mecca. So they always say there's a constant and evolving. From constant, which is thabit, gives us tradition and turath. From evolving, we have innovation, ibtikar. From tradition, we have continuity, istimrariya. From ibtikar, we have evolution, tatawwur. And from continuity, you will have unity, and tawheed, and then you have tatawwur, which is diversity, tanawwa. From the balance between unity and diversity falls in within the concept of balance or equilibrium, which is something is very much celebrated in the way even we think in terms of design, or it's a tool of thinking that we always want to celebrate. And if you look at the old inventions that happened, which is the astrolabe, it's also based on something that was invented before. So it's all this beautiful continuation that happened. But each generation comes, or each culture comes, add something to it. And I love this saying from one of the famous artists. He said, I don't steal art, I borrow art. So when you take the art, you add something from it, and you pass it on to the next person. My grandfather is a mutawif. My father's an architect. Also, he works for Tawaf. Tawaf and Mutawifin usually are the Mecca residents, the host, the pilgrims that comes from all over the world. So their houses were open, and you would have this people-to-people contact between each other. And that's why some of the houses in Mecca, you will see the influence of the different regions from India, from Morocco, from each part of the world, and even their dialect and the way they talk, a bit influenced from that. Me and him, we always debate. And my brothers as well, there's Hassan and there's Mohsen as well, they're also joining us today. Each one of us, they are in their own path, but we feel like culture, in a way, it needs to be passed on. But it's okay to argue, and that's the normal side. It's okay to see and take whatever in the past, and don't take something from the past if it doesn't really work for the current time. But there is this beautiful continuation that happened from a traditional side, and also from a father to a son, and how do you treat. If you look at the countries around the world, if they are very close within their family, look at their culture. If they're further away, look at their culture as well. So there's this beautiful continuation that happened. My father's an architect, and his the most difficult, I think, client for an architect is himself. So he really spent quite a time building the house, And the house in Jeddah, it became like a cultural house that we host a guest. And yes, we live in it, but it becomes like a living museum because a lot of the tradition or heritage that we have, now there's this beautiful spotlight that in preservation and caring for it. And whenever my father built within this concept to and allow people to come in and celebrate the concept of unity and the collective part within a space. And I think he built it in a mind that it's going to become a foundation or a waqfiyya, which is an endowment. And I think this is what his intention was, and it's becoming and forming naturally since it's very much based on a family initiative. Sorry. So, and you can see within the house, you have an open court area, and each part of it is detailed. My mother was the interior designer. They had all this beautiful debate and dialogue about each part. But in this side, we have a lot of people that comes from different parts of the world. We have discussion, talks. The Japanese monk with my father talking about the similarity between the chanting and the adhan and how they can celebrate as-sahba, which very traditional music in Mecca that happened. We used to gather them and again continue this. I'm a fan of jazz. When I came back from New York, New York, actually, before I went to New York, played a big part of who I am right now. I was here in '99. I spent around 4 or 5 years, and really it was the first time I really experienced neighboring. We do have it as a concept in Jeddah. In some part of the kingdom, they do celebrate it still, but in Brooklyn, living there, knowing the people, it really showed me who I am and how I can deal and talk with others with different culture and different way of thinking. So when I was there, I was very much influenced by jazz. And I wanted to see the similarity between jazz and Hijaz, which is the name of the region that I live in. And we made this couple of times without any rehearsal. They came together, they celebrated, they listened to one another for a few minutes, and then they jammed together. What's nice about jazz is even with the mistake, you still have to just follow the rhythm. You know, there's still something there is going. And I found it beautiful to see it in how two cultures comes along with a form of art. And I think this is one of the big reasons why we're here and why we're communicating right now. It was in 2006, and we were surprised. Everybody really enjoyed it and came there. And you can see even the mixture of people coming in, and we call it Jazz the Hijaz at that time. We have, hopefully soon, wave of change that's happening and to celebrate the diversity that we have, whether within the kingdom and outside. My father built the house and in a new urban setting. It's not in the old district of Jeddah. It's almost like a seed when you put it in and then start expanding. Next to it is our grandfather's house and my uncle, and we turn it into a studio or a creative hub. In the middle of it, we have the archive, which is I'm going to show you later, of the old photos. So my father was very much fond by the history and heritage of Mecca and Medina, and he noticed that a lot of transition that happened, so he documented very much of the architecture and some of the arts of it, and now we're actually making this hopefully available to the public to see. The pool is also one of the places we have auditorium and talks. My brother Ahmad is into a greenhouse. He wanted to build this beautiful organic kind of food within the whole settings. Here we have, recently we rented a villa that we have artists, we host them there as well, and the workshop, which is actually next door. And then we have the cultural garden we're working on. But this, what you see right now, it's been around 30 or 40 years of development. So each part is always added and added and added. Usually stuff like this, it needs a lot of support, but it's been our passion. All of us are artists in the house, and we're trying to manage each other, sometimes with success, sometimes with not, but it's part of the story of what we believe in, and we call it Al Makmad Foundation. And In the house, hopefully if some of you come to Jeddah, you're more than welcome to come, but you would see the office and the house and the studio. It's just natural. So when you have guests, it becomes part of this unit that is in there. This is some photos of the culture garden. This is some of the artists actually renting the studio right now. Also, we have students coming and researchers who's into, for example, Young, she was really Korean, and she was working with the King Faisal Research Center. And she was interested in the Chinese immigrant that went to Mecca. So she went and came and looked at the photos, had a dialogue with my father and others within that space, and we let her stay because it's part of what we want to do, an exchange of knowledge between them. Another thing, if you talk about culture, there is something that is now, that is present. We always think, we've been always nostalgia about the past, and the past was this, and the past was better, and the past at all, which is, again, you can see what's the difference between the past and present and the future, but this again, continuation. But the present time, if you look at the street of Jeddah, you would see, for me, because I'm interested in furniture, I noticed to see a lot of furniture that is laid around in the streets. And each one of them, you can see it have some sort of a character, right? Maybe it tells you, okay, maybe this place that is next to the guy who actually bought it because there was somebody moving the chair all the time. And even within this area, you can see the guards had placed the tiles in such a way that they can sit down, and they created this beautiful habit and ritual that they can meet and gather. And this is evidence of what maybe some we used to have as a mirkaz. We have the mirkaz, wal umda, and sitting. So even though it's the new settings, again, I think with human nature, you tend to develop and tend to innovate when they need it to. And some others are really celebrated the way they look. And I love the stories that happen behind those chairs, because a chair is a chair because we said it's a chair, and we sit on it, we play, and there's this life that happens behind it. But there is a lot abandoned and thrown away to the stage that I start really collecting and even just putting some comments on them. For example, this scene is called "Last Night Was Crazy." You can see there's something that really happened last night, and even the trash is just upside down. And a few others that is really beautiful to see. هذا كان في البنشر حتى even البنشر منفوخ على الفاضي يعني, so you can see. And for me, it's interesting to see how also any normal human, they have the creative side, they have the artistic side within them. It just needs you to nourish it, and I do believe everybody have that within them. And I had fun a lot, to be honest, looking and documenting this. You see the chair بيلعب استغماية, and just counting to, you feel like it's. So it's really fun, without me interfering. I just wanted to see the situation now, how it is. I have a lot, so I'm just going to skip through most of them. And some of them is really even very spiritual for me to see that chair. It's almost like the sheikh or Sufi sheikh sitting with the turban, and even it just happened to be there's a place that sells mirrors and glass, and for me that was a very nice photo to see, and it gives you the character of an object. It makes it emotional for you. It makes you want to develop a story to it. So for me, it's always important, the journey of a destination, and we really notice it in certain cities we live in. For example, here in New York and in London and so forth, you have the subway and the tubes. Part of you going to everyday work is that journey that you sit and you meet people and you talk. It's not like sitting down from one place and then immediately you're in the other place. So journey is as important as a destination, and that applies a lot. Before in the Hajj, and the way Hajj came, it was almost, it's a life journey for life. People might die, it's just traveling from one place to another, it's very far away, but then they accumulated all this knowledge that they pass through each country that they go through. And the same thing with trade, and it's also, of course, the same thing with the process. For me, I see it with innovating and design as well. What really counts is that journey that you go through, because at the end, this is what you're going to carry as a maker or an artist. I see it also as well in nature. And in this case, I was working in the studio, and I saw a hive that came to the glass, and I started really documenting the process of it. And for me, it was fascinating to see the beautiful geometry of man geometry that is in the back with the Raushan, and see the beautiful geometry in nature that they develop. And I thought there must be a link. I cannot just ignore this. I really wanted to see how how each one of them connected to each other, and what can I learn from just seeing this. The way it looks section, because they came on the glass, it's almost like a section and cut. And you can see from night until daytime, they're still working and still producing and making. Which is difficult in this. You can see in a lot of the contemporary architecture right now is they apply a hexagonal shape in a free-form surface, almost like Zaha Hadid architecture that requires a lot of engineering for it to stand. And you can see there's a mimic, or there's a nature. They do it without even training. I was talking to a beekeeper, and a lot of people who's interested in bees, and the notion of bees disappearing right now nowadays in a lot of parts of the world. And it made it for me a study that I want to go into and see it from a point of view as a designer or an artist. So after they left, they called migrant bees. I cut the piece of glass, and because of also resourcing in Saudi and resourcing in Jeddah, I had to go to a hospital just to get a CT scan. So I went to the doctor and I told him, sorry, I just want to have this patient to be scanned. And I'm glad that he was very thrilled, and he was very himself happy. And he was, of course, there's no patient at that time, so he was really keen to see what's inside the hive in itself. My father was interested as well from an architectural point of view. So looking at the result and looking at the scan, it was really amazing to see the process that they develop, and seeing there's a beautiful vein in the center and how it's gradually evolved into layers and layers. And I never thought they're straight. I thought they're all interlinked together, and you have all these tubes and so forth. Even within Indisco, we tried to go with a small camera inside and see. If you notice, even we had to call it a patient name. It's called Ayman Fayoumi, as the hive's name, just to have it registered in the system. But it was thrilled, because each person we take it to a doctor or somebody he's interested to see. By his nature, humans are very want to know. Since they're young, they want to see what things taste like. They want to know what they are, how they're made. So I was very lucky when every time I pass through somebody, I see this interest. And for me, I don't know what direction I'm going through, but I wanted to really design with them or create something with them. So I did some part, had a zoom camera, and you can see they're working into different stages. So you have the wax, first of all, thrown on as dots, and somebody comes and they shape a pattern on the glass. Somebody else comes and draw on top of this pattern. So you see these beautiful layers. But what really fascinated me, because I do a lot of geometry and I use a compass as a tool, and I was wondering how they determine the size of the hive with their size of their body. And then I realized in a lot of times they use their tail and head as a guide. So if you can see in some part, they will mark, and then somebody comes else and mark. And there's this beautiful collectiveness that they see and they do work together, similar to developing hexagonal grid. So from there, I was really interesting to see. I don't want to copy nature, but I really want to have a dialogue with it. And I wanted to find a way that I can create the same hexagonal grid, but it also grows like a hive that grows. And in this work, it's called Simplicity and Multiplicity. And it was made from one simple unit, but when it's repeated, you create this beautiful surface without any nail or glue. They hold one another. And it was an inspiration from a traditional element that I will show you after the slide. But you can see they are holding one another perfectly. And I was very happy to see that now I have something to show to the bees after that. Like, look, I did something as well. But, thank you. But and I think in a way it's not tahaddi or challenging. It's just really celebrating the beautiful order that we have and seeing the different formation that we can come up with just only one simple unit. And even ironically, when the word was installed, the work, it almost feels like the bees working again together. And yes, it's all laser cut, but it was required a lot of hand and collective work together. I had people who had no idea of geometry, but they kind of get the idea completely by just looking and observing. And we had a beautiful time, even though this is one night behind the exhibition. But we managed to get it in there. And Ranim knows for sure that process. You can see her even passing by. Ahmad, And then, alhamdulillah, we really managed to put it in there, but it was nice to see also the layers that I wanted to show within the hexagon development. From there, and one subject I really, I always, my friends told me, you have ADD or you cannot really focus, which is true, very true. But the beauty about ADD, in a way, if does everything have faults, and the lack of something can give something an opportunity to it. But I think it's perfect for brainstorming. It's amazing when you think of random things when you're actually brainstorming and we actually development. I call myself musammim, which is a design in Arabic, but if you translate the word design into Arabic, it's tasmeem, and tasmeem, you got it back again to English, it's insistence. And if you put it back again in its meaning, it's بالعربي عكس التصميم هو التردد. So I've been living most of my life متردد, and I'm trying to be musammim, but التردد that really helps me really to move. The uncomfort that I have is always makes me move to the next step. So from that, looking at it, and I remember still working with the hive, I wanted to create this functional aspect that I want to have a chair that people can sit in and really deconstruct the pattern and construct it back again to develop a shape. And this is part of the beginning of the work. The only problem with me, I collect objects. So you find most of the studios in there. Some people sketch on paper, but I like to really sketch on object and work with object to see what I can come up with. From a regular pattern to see it, and I try to find a way to really explode it into 3D and see it within relation to the human proportion. How can this becomes a functional aspect? The pool I was mentioning you before earlier, this is what we do usually in it. And it's a good platform for me to experiment my design work on my friends and work and to see how they respond to it. But in the pool, it have a beautiful stories. When I came back, and it was my grandfather's house, so I just saw the pool and saw the water, and the water is it's a luxury to have a pool in there. So I really wanted to take water out and pour people in, and I want people to really flow within that space. I love the idea of movement, of motion. And some of us here was the first time that we talk and we discuss, we celebrated. Each one of us talented. And I did this open mics and together with the team. Every once a month, Saudis will come along and we have a discussion and talks. First time for me, I have a public phobia of speaking. Maybe you noticed a bit, but it was perfect for me to have that settings and to have it around. And really developed from hearing all the voices and became an inspiration part of the Street Pulse project, which is an artwork that I have. If you get the chance to see the Philip Gallery, it's exhibited there. And the idea behind it is when I give a microphone to a group of people, I was very much inspired to hear their voices and sound. I wanted to give a microphone to my own city and see what my own city would say. فديس saying في العربي السبع صنايع والبخت ضايع هذا المثل دائما يخوف. And this saying that كيف واحد قال بالانجليزي سبع صنايع والبخت ضايع, the master of none, Jack of trade, master of none. And this saying always كان يقلقني and make me very nervous because I love to know about things. بكون أسوي ده بسوي ده, I want to do this and I want to do that. So I love this saying when I heard it, know something about everything and know everything about something. It's part of who we are, nature, that we want to know a lot of things. Why you want to block that? Just keep it there. But put all your focus into one thing and know everything about it. And I think that's normal. That's the way us humans think. And I saw that when you focus about everything, when you focus about everything about one thing, you become crafted at it. You become a person talented with a specific mahara or skill, and I see it a lot in the craftsman, and that's why you see people, the pottery maker or the woodworker or the carver, they spend so much time on a specific craft to build this beautiful heritage of the city. Now, alhamdulillah, in Saudi, there's a lot that's been preserved. Alhamdulillah, القط العصير أخي الكبير علي مغاوي, and their amazing work they have done is now registered in UNESCO. And there's so much others around. I speak from my own place, and I see that there is a lot to be preserved. And alhamdulillah, now this beautiful energy that to look back in history and to really appreciate what we had and to shed light into it. For me, since I come from Mecca originally and I live in Jeddah, having the access of the archive of my father have collected, I was very much inspired by the rawashin, the wooden work. And this is photo haven't been seen yet. This is photos of Mecca that the houses exist and you can see the beautiful geometry and beautiful woodwork. So I wanted to really focus and know everything about this craft and put all my energy into one thing and know so much about it. And al-mangur, which is al-manqur bil-qaf al-manjur bil-jim, it's a craft that you see a lot in Mecca and Medina and Jeddah house, even in Yamba, but also an influence you can see in Mashrabiya and Egypt. But in Mecca and the region, it's a bit different, as I was explaining before, this kind of collective, this kind of synergy of composition work, and I was very much fond by them. And I really wanted to know their story and why they were done in these proportions, why wooden windows itself in the houses there. And if you look at even Sawakin in Sudan, which is also a portal city, they have also a very similar craft. And a lot of people believed it was also crafted by Hijazi people from the region, and also in parallel line with the craftsmen who came, of course, from different parts. And you can see the beautiful proportion that they exist in, and I was really wanted to see the different typology that they exist and trying to document, because I haven't seen any documentation really done through this, from the photos that they have and why those kind of letters, why those kind of units that they exist, and also the proportion of it. I was very keen to document the geometrical proportion that they have, and I made an analysis of making, an analysis of geometrical analysis, because this is lost. Fortunately, it is not, the proportion of it, the grid, the carpet of it is completely lost. So what we're trying to do is to document and also to see the process of its making, talking to the craftsmen, and each one of those by itself, they're very weak, but they hold one another becomes a very strong surface or screen. And they can expand within the space. And I have learned a lot from different craftsmen. Some of them are local, some of them from different parts of the world. Tahseen, Allah yarhamu, who's with us, was 27 years. Me and my brothers know him, Muhsin and Hassan, know him very well, and his brother as well, Tahseen, was a carver. So we worked together, and that was part of the story of the house and other project. And I learned some of the technique, and I wanted to innovate with him. How can we make this craft develop in a way that still have the same spirit, but it can have different way of making it. And looking at the traditional way of doing it, they used to mark the wood, so they know what kind of pattern they would develop. And then I realized each one of those have a name, and this name, they pass it on to one craftsman to another, because they work again like a hive collectively together with a one master craftsman there. From what I'm working on right now is to develop those units, and from those units within those proportions, so we know that it have to be within this size, because we always believe the circle is the maintainer of proportion. And if you look at it, even here with using today's technology, what I try to do is to also study the amount of light that comes from each unit. So when you design within a space, you can control, or you want to have in your preference 50–40% of light, and then you can compose your units together. For technology and craft, they can work together if they should serve the same purpose, which is for humanity to better their lives, to let them connected more and closer, more for their own nature. I believe anything that takes away from your own nature, this is something we don't tend to go to it closer. Now, if you look at how we live in the time, everybody wants to really reconnect back again to their own source and their own thing. So I found that a lot with the craft and the woodwork, and how those letters and units can develop together. And I call them letters because like almost A, B, C, D, and then when you put them together, you can come up with the word, and then from the word you can come up with the sentence. And all falls within the grammar of Islamic architecture, that they all kind of link together. I was very much fond by that, and so I started doing a lot of drawing. And if you notice, I celebrated the process. I really wanted to see the beauty of its making rather than the end result we usually see And that was big part of what I like to do, is to really investigate and go back to that process and go back to that journey and see what is something there in the DNA of it that it can be a motive for me to create something else. And I try to innovate within tradition. And on this side, you can see it's a book holder that is made from the same craft. And again, I love the education side, and I think this is very important for any artist to develop, is to really spend so much time in the research of it and developing of it. We found an old place there, and we make it in a way together with other gallery in collaboration with them to make this beautiful scene that it tells you everything about this craft, from the photos that was collected from the old wooden pieces there, and it sits within the old district of Al-Balad. And you see the different layers of work, from glass to paperwork to woodwork. And I found myself almost like there's a different way people meditate. People sometimes meditate by prayers, people meditate by doing yoga, people meditate by just running. Or for me, these forms of art, I have to make me a better human in terms of physically, mentally, spiritually. And I like to do something that elevate me as a craft. So if I'm working with my hand, I know my hand will develop the skills to become better. So I did maybe around 6 layers, and I could easily print this. Why should I just print it and go ahead? But the journey of it, I think, is something it's really neat. For me, it was very, very, very much inspiring to go with. This is some of the pieces, sadly, that was fallen from the houses. An exhibition, I made a part that is all geometrical analysis. So you can see the units, and all of those are pages of the book. So working in the book about the Mangur, inshallah. And again, with the focus of that idea of there's a pattern of making a pattern. There's this process that develops from a point to a circle, to the square, and so forth, until you have the end result. And that's usually not there. Usually this is the knowledge that sits within air or sits within our mind, but we develop the end result that we want to see. I love using glass and wood, and I find them can have a beautiful dialogue together. And from there, I started doing different series, and I love how kids react to the work, because it's their genuine reaction when they see something and they want to understand it. And I notice with geometry when I teach, and they're very comfortable, and they know the normal order of the triangle or the journey that people can see in developing and making them, and that's when the craftsman can be able to perfect something in his own hand, and he can connect his body and mind and soul into one thing. And even though there's the faults of it, but you can somehow relate to the artwork, or you can relate to the craft. And alhamdulillah, now there's people in Jeddah knows how to develop this, and I'm working right now to develop those screens, inshallah, in the British Museum, and that have a chance, the Makkah and Medina Mangur, within its proportion, to be set in a respectful institution there. And at the same time, find a way. The irony of this is because I had the exhibition that I showed you earlier, and sadly the house next door fell into it and broke almost everything in the exhibition. So I was very down, and I was felt like I tried to do something to preserve the culture there. Alhamdulillah, after that, I was very happy to hear that news. So I was thrilled to see now, not only in picture they exist, but there's a place that people can experience them from all over the world. It's going to be a big challenge, big project, and inshallah, using it, I'm documenting the whole process of how it developed and what the tools that was made. We made a team in London there that we work, again, collectively. And I think usually when people work together, it's always a beautiful influence you get to see, and a beautiful synergy that comes out of this. So each one of us was holding a certain part, but at the end, all of us are making one screen. And there's this beautiful proportion between the geometry of its making and then even the wood size and the cut size, they all link together. So now I can change or innovate without having a lot of waste of wood, because now my aim is not to really overuse wood and have a lot of waste. With this knowledge, I can maintain and I can balance that a bit. I was The topic was called flow, and I was telling Rarim I really want to have the name of flow there, because I do believe the flow of culture and the flow of ideas and the flow of moving, especially in a time right now, it's a motion. Similar to water, if water is settled or sets in and water is moving, of course, كلنا نعرف المويه لما تكون ثابته تصير عكره. It doesn't really collect a lot of bacteria and so forth. But if it's a moving river, that's something that is healthy. And for me, this idea was really interesting to see for this work that I wanted to do. I do usually a lot of work with wood, but I really wanted to go to the source of wood. I really work with water. And it was a challenge a bit because water doesn't have a shape. Only when it becomes solid, as you saw in the snowflakes, you can see some sort of a shape to it. And that's the challenge that I really wanted to go with it more. And I wanted to celebrate the idea في القرآن وجعلنا من الماء كل شيء حي. And I wanted to really create a work that it becomes alive once you introduce water to it. From looking at all the different sketches and angle and trying to find a way where I can start from the point again to the line. And then I found myself interested in the journey. And I was trying to play around what kind of sculpture I can do. And again, looking at the beautiful geometry that exists. And I started looking at weaving technique. But the challenge part came along when I was trying to control the liquid. So I was trying to find a way to balance between air and water. And I found myself going into a completely different field of engineering. And I was afraid of it. But again, the concept of me that I want to know. I just want to really know this knowledge, this side. So I started going to a lot of places, Shara al-Baladi, if some of you from Jeddah, it's all for the plumbing. And so I became an expert on plumbing. And trying to find some machines that can give me this kind of effect and control the air and water within dots. And I wanted to find a way that each dot becomes a second, and then from a second becomes an hour. So I think in my mind I really wanted to create a water clock, but I didn't realize it's impossible to do because the friction of water within those tubes, you cannot be consistent. So then I just celebrated the motion of water within those tubes. And I used food color just to see, I can see water and air together and how they bond, and start weaving and developing patterns to really highlight this idea. And at that point, I didn't know what I was heading to, but I really wanted to go, as they say, with the flow and see what can happen from that. And I started really sketching, and there's so much water in the studio. I'm glad I did most of this work in the pool, which is really give a perfect purpose to it. But it was really interesting to see the surprise that because each time I curve those tubes, the pressure becomes high and the gravity makes it faster or slower. So that was a very interesting part, that it tells me what it does, even though I'm trying to let it do something that I wanted to do. And again, I found a certain machine that gives that kind of dots to it, but then I have to introduce air to a compressor. This is just a bit of sketches. Then I want to introduce two colors and see from each color separately together they move, but when they come together they can merge and they can create a pattern. But each one of them can show the process of flying that comes from the end to the start. But you can see the pool there. And so I made sure that any water that falls or drips, and it's there. But I love almost the energy, or almost like it's an alive thing. You feel like it's ants, it's bees, it's something that is moving and within motion. And this is out of my comfort zone. I'm very much more into order and geometry, even though my life is not like that. But somehow maybe I like to do it in an artwork. And I like this balance between the chaos and order. I had a lot of creators came to me and told me, Ahmad, you should do something not with geometry, just do something different. And I really stood at that time and I thought that if there is anything done without geometry, there's always geometry, but there's geometry that we comprehend or not. But it doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. It doesn't mean that there's a geometry there that we don't know about. thinking about this idea, I really, again, investigated, tried to see if I can control those dots, are they more longer or shorter, it depends on the feeling that I want to get from it. And I went on many sides. I wanted to create a Maida structure, which is a place for evolution, for Muslim people to wash their hands, and this structure becomes alive once you walk into it in the time of prayers. Then I wanted to create a progressional geometry that shows you the process of development from the dot and then the line, and then you have a dual pattern there that exists. فبين للمجنون ادي القرص المجنون يعقل المثل ده. I think so. عشان مكاوية بنتي مكاوية. ففي there's this saying, if you really, for me, if you have a space, I know what to do خلاص, and he's not going to go everywhere. So sometimes it's really good to have a foundation or a center. And in this case, okay, this is the space, Ahmad, do something with it, instead of going all over the place. From looking at the space, looking at the proportion, I even wanted to create, when those dots comes on the floor, and you have another pattern that comes into it. And this is when I realized, like, wait a minute, just don't go that far. Just try to take it step by step, and then maybe develop it to the next stage. But I love the creation of pattern, because for me, it's like almost the creation of culture. It really develops, and by time you can see it forming. And you cannot force that. It needs to have its time to develop. You need to have its time to see it growing. And for me, maybe a person without history or heritage, it's almost like a person having Alzheimer. He can still function. He can still be now. He can still be present. But in a way that, where he goes back home, the address of his place, is still those things. And I think it can be very clear. And a lot of the cities around the world have lost that, or either went too much or done too little for culture. And the idea, again, of forming something with the clock, I'll look at some examples there, look at different tradition, and I realize in the Tibetan tradition as well, they do that as a form of prayer, when they sit all together and meditate to create this beautiful sand art, and then at the end, you just wash it off as if nothing was there. But it's this beautiful form that they celebrate this journey, and then and beliefs of energy. And again, with the use of silence and vibration, those kind of patterns also can develop. And trying to, again, see the connection, trying to build something in there. Then at the end, the question came of color. What color should I use? What color do I want to work with? Red almost symbolized blood for me, but I wanted to really be close to the idea of water. So I found myself going towards blue, and I wanted to find a way to use one color for now, and then later on develop it into more variation of different hues of one color, because the mechanism of it, if I introduce 3 or 4 colors, I have to think of the tank that goes back to it again, and that's another road that I have to go into. So I started with just only one color. I'm trying to spread this container that you can see here through the structure, and it comes back again to it. From looking at the geometry of the space that I had there, I really wanted to show the relation between man and space. And man in geometry is symbolized by the triangle, and space, in this case, is a rectangle. I was very interested in parabolic line geometry, which is a straight line that comes from one point to another, but it gives you this illusion that it's curved, but in actual sense, they're all straight. I created this piece that every time you go and visit in 2139, you really experience a different motion or flow, either faster or slower. But really, at some point, you would go close to it and you hear the water sound within the space. And I wanted to make it in a way that it reacts to the visitors. Installing it was a bit challenging, but once you know the order, you can see me on the top there just trying to fix the light and structure, but once you know the order, it will come immediately. And the geometry there, it came like that because the space told me that it had this kind of proportion. And working with the team there, once you introduce it, you see as plain, and once you introduce color, you can see the process of it developing and becomes something that is alive once you introduce water. And I love the idea and how air and water together into one structure, that you can see its relationship. I learned so much about pressure, so much about gravity. I even I know so much about food color as well. I was wondering, food color, do you use it in food, but it really stain very, just be careful. It does really stain. All my clothes, they don't go. But it really, for me, I wanted to create like the idea of fountain that people sit around, and water have this beautiful magical effect that people really feel close to. But I really wanted to show the mechanism. It's almost a near fountain. It's a beautiful mechanism. And this is what I tried to do here. And the process of if its development using the machinery, because I used to do a program, and this program will give the certain data at a specific time, and then the introduction of air and water together. So you can see this is the air compressor coming in, and this is the liquid coming from all those tanks. If the tank was lighter or darker, it will immediately affect the work. And all these dots, it's controlled automatic or manual, and you can control the whole structure by introducing the, as you call it, the pulse of the work. So each one of them can really give you a different effect of how the pulse are. And really, one side, I think, passing on to the generation and culture is to teach kids. And our kids have this kind of knowledge, I do believe, and they have something that they celebrate within themselves because they know this language. And by doing this analysis or by innovating, they themselves also, you always want to innovate. You give them an order, but they always want to do something else with it, which is fine. But as long as we know the foundation of work in itself. In the house that I showed you earlier, this is some of the tours that we do for kids. They come along and you choose a pattern within the house, and we sit down and we draw it together. This is a kid I was very much inspired by. He had an autism, and he didn't really wanted to ask for a tool, or he just did. And he did all the geometry by hand, and I was very, and it was the first time he does the geometry, but to see him really interested in developing a pattern by just looking without any tool is really fascinating. And again, cultures can bind us together. Most of the group, all of them actually, from Philippines. And they really enjoyed looking at the pattern, they really connected to it, and they love the proportion that sits within it. And again, this is part of who we are and what we are. We want to develop and move forwards with again, the diversity that bonds us together. And looking at those geometry units, there is all this link that can connect us together. Just some few about the school that we have in Jeddah. It's a collaboration between the Princeton School of Traditional Arts and Art Jamil. Now we have a school to revive the craft and art in Jeddah. And by looking at the old houses, trying to really scan or really try to understand and analyze those patterns there, and develop traditional pigments from natural elements. Again, we're going back to the source and taking ourselves further a bit. But there's this enjoyment of us developing and making it. And the work they come up with, some of them had no art background. It's their first time to develop an artwork, but to see amazing results gave me more confidence that yes, each one of us have this creation part. We just need to really give it a push, or really give it a flow, that let it happen, let it develop. Those are the kids also within the Al Jeddah. They come along to the center, we teach them and we work together with them. So it creates this beautiful energy. Before I want to end this beautiful concept as it started in the beginning of the universe, so you can see our understanding that the sun sits in the center and everything revolves around it, which is true and we believe in it. In the past, somebody told you that the earth is the center and everything revolves around it. And now there's all this theory that we believe because science tell us that this is the way it is. And it's beautiful to feel from this video that I saw, and I think it's scientifically proven right, that even the sun, it's within a motion. It's yes, it does move, everything moves around it, but still there is direction, there is a path that it goes to. And all the planets move around it and move through it. And sometimes in life, we can't debate and we really see it the way they are, but if you really step away and see it from a different angle, it does have the same idea, but really see it within a motion. And I believe from looking at that, we are heading towards somewhere as humans, as culture, as even in our discovery in the world around us, we're still discovering, we're still learning. So I just hope we really go with the flow and enjoy and learn from what's happening around us. And thank you so much for listening to me, and sorry for the long time. But if you have any questions, please feel free. Thank you. There's a microphone if you'd like to have. I like to have a debate or questions. It'd be nice if you have something you disagree or agree, or for a few minutes, I guess. A lot of you are my friends and family here, so. Mahsin. Okay, saying hi. Yes.
We were talking about the screens.
Al-Manjur, yes. They are cousins. Yes, because both of them allow light and natural air to come to the house or space, similar to the Jali in Afghanistan as well. All of them are from the same architectural element. If you look at China, if you look at Japan, also in their houses, they have almost the same kind of concept. They were made because the residents of the house, they wanted to allow air to come in. But each culture have developed it in the way that they saw it, in the patterns that they saw it in. But the way they're made are different, because mashabiyah are made in a milling machine. It's almost similar to the prayer bead. So they're done rounded. And the manjur is more of a lap joint technique. They're all half and half, then they hold one another. The mashabiyah are side joint. And if you take one, it can break all of them. The manjur is more of like a 45-degree grid. And this is the making of it. The geometry of it completely changed, because one of them using a square grid system, the other is using more of a also, there's different folds, but it's not the same in a way. And if you ask me which is before, and because there's always this dilemma, the milling of the prayer bead, you can see it in Christianity, you can see it in Judaism, you can see it in Islam, and Buddhists as well. They use the same prayer bead, and that was done many, many years ago. So there is this technique that exists, but I think with the lap joint, it meant to hold the screen within a bigger space, to allow air and the wood to breathe, so it doesn't break. So that's why those half and half hold to one another, and even if it expands, they still kind of work together. But yeah, they're very similar, but some people call them mashrabiyah, some people call them roshan. It's not a known term right now. We're still learning about the manjur. If you look at in the website, you find an old instrument. It's called a manjur, or also there's a city in Saudi called a manjur, or a village, yeah. But it's not necessarily related, but it is a craft that exists. And it's been in Hijaz. Hijazi people have made it, and also craftsmen who came and worked with it. They're even more talented than some people of the residents there. And it's decaying. There's nobody who knows how to do it. I've met a lot of people, a lot of craftsmen. I traveled around just to see in the kingdom who makes it anymore, but sadly there's very few. And whoever exists, I was trying to find Sheikh al-Najjarin, the master of the craft there, but they know the terms, but the skill of making it, it's gone. Yeah. But inshallah now with the school and the teaching, I hope they can develop and they can make. Alhamdulillah, they're innovating within the units even. Yeah, there's different openings that happen. But first, giving the respect and documentation of all this proportion that happened in there. لا للأسف. If you look at Yanbu and Jeddah and Makkah Medina, طبعا it's completely, بس ما في للأسف. There is programs and workshops to introduce it again, but we really have to work fast. I'm working with the Saudi Commission of Antiquities as a consultant, and we went to document as much as possible from the craftsmen that exist there. برنامج بارح حرف السعودية, they're developing something, as you know, but I think I'm a bit jealous to have Al-Qat for UNESCO, and I feel like we have so much others. That's why. Yes. Yes. Yes.
So if it's either endangered, but if it already died, it's not
possible. Well, no, I can always do CPR. Try. Just maybe يمكن it'll be still right, and yes, and that's why I had a long answer to show it, because I know, and we talked about it before, and I wish really if this could be done in a way, because if you look at people, it's a known craft. Yeah, and if you look at the houses of Makkah, Medina, Jeddah, 80% or 70% are made from wood. And there's who makes it, who developed it.
This is a question for you as Hijazi who's worked in culture.
Mm.
There's a lot of debate about culture and the Hijazi, which is being originally Saudi.
Mm.
Most of them is
Yes, that's a very good question. Yes, yes.
So is this originally Saudi?
The word original Saudi is very by itself. It's, you know, if you once you say original Saudi, you're saying that I'm Saudi and others are not. And that's a very important concept because, as you know, in developing and doing this, but if you look at it in the location of Saudi and Jeddah, you have 13 regions, right? And each region have a beautiful culture. And if you go way, way beyond, before pre-Islamic and so forth, there's so much culture that exists, Madain Saleh and so forth. Is Madain Saleh Saudi? Yes, but it's registered also as something that is Saudi. So what I'm trying to say is, if it's there, it's Saudi. And if you talk about Mecca and Hijaz region specifically, يعني ربنا كان يقدر يختار سويسرا or another nice area that is have a nice weather and people can go and flow into it. But there's a reason that Mecca is Mecca, and there's a reason that it's meant for all being to be there. And that is a sanctuary by itself. So the laws need to be treated in a way that there is a unity for sure, because you need to have a sense of belonging. But there is this beautiful diversity within it that makes it what it is. And there's always a link from each craft, because you can see that out of the Moroccan work or the Yemeni work or even Persian or Egyptian work, it's there. But it really made it the way it is. If you look at the families there, as you know, there's a lot of families from Beit al-Maghribi, Beit al-Farisi, and they're originally Meccan families. And there's no way that you can find that yes, Assalamu alaikum first. But it's true, if you look at it, even the architecture as well. So it's a very important element, but for me, I feel it, and yeah, when we talk about it, and there's this debate, if you live in New York, you become a New Yorker. If you live in London, you become a Londoner. If you live in Mecca, you become a Meccan in a way. But you need to have this kind of sense of belonging, and it can go, ideally, if I believe, and I feel like this is the house of God, I feel this place is فحلو الجيولوgy in this way. But it always comes in academically, true, this question, what is, what is it? But I like this, we can look at it in a different way.
Do you know how
Well, I tried to look at it into books, and I found there's one book that talks about it visually from photos, but there is also verbal that has been spoken about it. في كتاب اسمه الأزرقي, he documented the Tarikh of Mecca. And he have mentioned that في بيوت لها أجنحة. There's houses that have wings. So these wings شكلها عثمانية ولا شكلها مملوكية ما احنا عارفين, but it does have there, because the natural topography of the location, if it's close to the sea or this, you need to have air to come along. So maybe this start. And there is also somebody have told me, there's a hadith, I'm not sure if it's ضعيف وهذا, بس إنه في كان law, somebody in the house have extruded out with a wooden structure. And they were saying, how did your Prophet allow him to have this? And because it's part of his house, and then again, the question of the public street, and he's taking part. So there is these questions there, and they need to be investigated more. So I'm not sure I can give you a specific answer, but I know it's been there from before, but the influence of the different ingredients that came along enhance it. I'm sure, for example, في الخط العسيري, you can see the triangle, right, in many cultures. If you look at this, the Tibetan symbol, the swastika, which is, you can see it in Germany, and when you look at it, you have a negative effect, right? You feel like this is a very bad sign. But in roots, if you look at it, it's in tradition in Tibet, they have used this pattern, and it's completely opposite in a way it means. It's always been like this, and I think there's always something from one culture to another, because this is who we are. We have our own, we celebrate it, and then we have something we connect with others. Yeah, thank you. Yes, Allah يستر.
You were saying you're a jack of all trades and master of none. But if you look back into your journey, and if you were to pinpoint one part of it that you enjoyed the most, and if you were to only channel into that direction, what would it be?
I would love sometimes just to I would love sometimes to throw everything and just really become a carpenter and like really have a wood shop and really just do my own work. But I think I will do that maybe later on when I, and I can, but I feel like I just want to know so much about wood. I relate to it very much. It always grows, always changes, always bends with the temperature and what's around. And it's always a live material. So when you design with it or you work with it, you know it's going to twist or change. So yes, I relate to this very much. And another thing could be, I love cooking, but I don't know how to do any cooking. But I love this idea of, but yeah, definitely a carpenter. A carpenter definitely would work for sure.
And maybe another thing I want to say, it's not a question, it's actually a comment. I know Ahmad Angawi for so many years right now, and from working with him, he's actually not the jack of all trades and master of none. He's a master of all of them because he's very curious and he's a perfectionist, and that's what makes him feel like he's jack of all and master of none. But he actually gives everything a thorough thoughtfulness into the process until execution, and he is truly a perfectionist from what we could see from his presentation and actually working throughout many of his projects with him. And the last minute, Ahmed just put this together, is because he's really, up until the last minute, he tries to find alternative ways of actually making it better. And that actually shows how much of a humble artist you are when you never feel that what you're giving is enough to teach the audience what you're going through. So I just wanted to end it on this note.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
One more question, sorry.
Sorry, it's crazy. So you're talking about how you're trying to not mimic nature, but have a dialogue with it. And there's the nature about nature, the fact that it's transitory and everything fades away and decay. And in capturing it in art, in some sense, you make it still or last longer. So how do you reconcile these opposite things in your work between capturing nature and its decay, and between making it into an art that will remain for long?
But maybe with the weather and this, maybe the artwork will fade away as well. It depends on the environment. But I think nature is constant. Because even if you look at nature around us, it's one thing, the mountains, but us is within us there is nature. I do believe the in nature of who we are, and I think that will sustain as long as humans sustain it. But with art, as you mentioned, it can capture this. It can really show it as an object. You can really see it there, that it relates to something that was in there. And I like the similarity in between. There is this kind of relation. Of course, you can do exactly the way the art. You can do design. For example, if you look at the stadium was designed recently with the famous architect. He almost did it like a nest, the idea of a nest of a bird. I think it's in China or so forth, but it's beautiful when you look at it. But to how far and extent, what we're trying to show, what we're trying to challenge. For example, the beautiful buildings in Manhattan, you can see the high-rise building was done using this beautiful technology that exists. It's perfect because it's almost like an island in a way. You have to build vertically because there's no space. But if you take the same concept and build it in a different area, maybe we don't need to have this high rise. We can work with the land at its end. So sometimes nature really tells us what it needs. And I do believe in terms of architecture, it should be a continuation of nature within that space in there. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much.